When I open BasePac, the Quick Start buttons do appear. We have several options here where we can do a new design, open an existing design, we can open the last design. We have our template options. This is for things like name drop. We also have the print and statistics, embroider the design, backup, restore, and then exit. You can opt to not show this anytime that we open up the program and rather just go to the blank screen. I will first choose New Design. So when I left click on New Design, you'll see that my screen is now blank and I do have a cursor flashing. The reason I have a cursor flashing is because on the left hand side of my screen, M for monogramming or text mode is selected. If you are selected on your module mode or your cursor, you won't see that flashing cursor. So in order to insert some text, I will left click on the text mode. So when I left click on the text mode, there's a couple of things that I'd like to look up on here on this bar that's going to tell me some information on the text itself. First of all, the needle number. When I input the lettering, right now, the needle will be set on number 1. We can change this now, or we can change it later. If the thread that I'm using is on a different needle, I will want to click on the needle and choose what number I'm using. So if I'd like to use needle 8, for example, I'd press 8. And now it will allow me to stitch the name with needle 8 on the machine. The next thing is the standard. That is the standard value, but since we did change the needle, I'm going to change it back, and that standard will go away. That's their standard setting. The next option over is your font type. These fonts have all been pre-digitized, and you do have the ability to convert a TrueType font to a digitized font in the program. But for now, what we see here when we use the drop-down arrow, what we have at the top here are the fonts that we've recently used. And as I move over and mouse over a font, it will show me what the font looks like. So if I choose a font and left click on it, that font will now be input whenever I put in my lettering. The next one is the size. So the next function here is the size. This is in millimeters. And millimeters to inches, there's about 25.4 millimeters to an inch. And this is also according to the capital letter. I'm actually going to take this little bar over here and move that off to the side. So if I'd like to change the size, I can just highlight it with a left click, hold, and drag, and change the size to my desired size. The next option is the lettering alignment. Anytime I hit the enter and do more letters, I want to make sure that those lines of text are centered or aligned to the left or aligned to the right. I also have the ability to vertically align it. And then these next options here, I'm actually going to go over those after we input some lettering. So in here, I will go ahead and input some lettering. I just place my cursor right here. You can see and I just left clicked. My cursor actually went a little bit smaller because I did change the size. I'm going to type in the word embroidery. Once I've typed in that word, if I'd like to change anything, once my cursor, you can see as my cursor moves around, I have the M, or if I move it close to the lettering, it turns into a little cursor icon. If I left click, hold, and drag, I can drag over each letter, and you can see that it selects each letter. And if I'd like to change the font type, because this one's a little bit hard to read, I will go ahead and change the font type. Once I change that, you can see it changes it within my screen. I left click back here to deselect And if I hit enter, I'll just go ahead and start typing in new words. And you can see now that it is centered. If I would like to change the alignment, I'm going to left click, hold and drag and highlight all my letters. And now I can do left aligned. And I can do right alignment. So you can see these letters are aligned, at the end letters are aligned, and the beginning letters are aligned. And then I can do center as well. As far as the slant angle, that is going to be the italicizing. So I can input a slant angle. Let's say we do 25, and I hit the enter key. It will now slant it. And that will be to the right. If I input a negative symbol and then hit enter, it will go to the left. At 0, it will be straight up and down. The next button after the angle is the ability to change the boldness of the lettering. And first what I'm going to do is I am going to deselect all the lettering because I want to show you how we can measure what the lettering width is. So I'm just going to left click with my cursor, with the cursor icon right next to the letter, and it will deselect. On the right hand side, or I'm sorry, on the left hand side, I do have some zoom tools, and I will choose the zoom up tool, left click on it one time. As I move my cursor over the design, it will turn into a magnifying glass. So I'll left click, hold, and drag over my letter and make a box over it, and it will zoom in just on this. Now, I will use the combination key Control plus the letter L, and once I do that, you can now see as I move my cursor, I have the ability to measure with an anchor point. If I'd like to move the anchor point, you just left click, hold, and drag to that stitch point. I'm just moving to a stitch point that I'd like to measure, and let go of your left click. Once I let go of my left click, now my anchor is in one place. I will move over to the right hand side to about where I want to measure the thickness. And if I look down at the bottom right hand side, and I'll just point it out right here, I have some measurement units. And what I'm going to do is if I look at this measurement right here, and I see that it's about 1.9, that's 1.9 inches or 1.9 millimeters wide. If I'd like to take this design up to about 2.5 millimeters wide, or like the stitching to 2.5 millimeters wide, I then need to take 2.5 minus 1.9. And the difference between that would be 0.6. So that is what I actually want to enter in this box. In order to get out of the measurement tool, you can simply hit escape on your keyboard. Once I hit escape, I am back to where I have either the M or the cursor, and now I will click on the tool Zoom All, which is all modules, and now I can see all of my lettering. I will then put my cursor next to the E, left click, hold, and drag over all my letters. Now in the boldness setting, I will go ahead and input 0.6, enter. Once I do that, and I will left click again to deselect, we can now see our letters are much thicker. Now they're they're 2.5 millimeters wide as far as the stitching goes. The next option that is available is the constraints for a text line. We can give the lettering a maximum text length to follow, and it will actually compress the letters if it needs to. So let's go ahead and select all of our letters, and you can see that my cursor is blinking right here. Another easy way to select all the letters is if I use the key combination Control and the letter A. When I use that Control and the letter A, it selects all. So here, right now, with it not pressed in, there is no maximum text length, meaning that it's going to put it in the best fit line that it sees available. So if I left click on this option right here, I can then choose a text length that I want it to follow. If I want it 75 millimeters long and I hit the enter button, you can see now my letters will only go onto a text path of 75 millimeters. And the text height will stay the same, but you can see it'll condense that, it will condense the letters themselves. So we can make it go larger or smaller, and you can see how things will change as we go larger or smaller. Now if we turn it off, it will put it on the best fit path. The next option is the stitch division. This will give the stitches a pattern, and you can give it a pattern right down the middle, or a regular stitch division, irregular, rhythmic, or just no division at all. We'll see these a little bit later and see what they look like. The next option is the underlay. You can add underlay just simply by choosing one of the underlays here. You have a centerline underlay, and you can now see that we have an underlay right in the center of the letters. We have a contour underlay, which will go on the inside edges of the stitching. We have a zigzag. We also have the zigzag with a center run underlay. And then we also have the border and the zigzag underlay, so which is like the contour underlay with the zigzag. So that's quite a bit of underlay. Or you can choose to have no underlay at all. The next option are going into the parameters, which if I left click on the parameters, some of these parameters are up here on our toolbar. Now within these text parameters, you have the ability to change the width. This would be the width of all the letters, not the boldness, but the width of all the letters. If I go ahead and highlight this, and let's make this 125%. So I'll hit close after that, and once I do that, you can see our letters are now extended out. I will click on the All Modules Zoom, and you can see that my lettering does extend out. You can see each letter is a bit wider. So we'll go back to the parameters, and I will go ahead and change this back to 100%. And once I hit enter, you can see it change right on screen, so I don't have to hit close every single time. The character space refers to the distance between each letter. At 0%, it will do it automatically. If I do 50% and hit enter, you can see that it actually extends that spacing quite a lot. And that's going to be 50% of each letter's width. The word spacing, now this is for words. This refers to the words that are next to each other. We won't see any sort of change here, but word spacing would be the space between, refers to the space between each word on a single line. The line space refers to this one here. The line space is going to be the spacing between rows or two lines or more. And if I take this down to 25% and hit enter, you can see it gets closer to each other. So you can change that line spacing however you'd like. The column spacing, now that only has to do with this vertical alignment up at the top here. This won't change anything with what we see right now. It has to do with the column distance. Rotation angle, that will be of each individual letter. So if I need to rotate the letters 45 degrees, I will hit enter, and you can see each letter is rotated 45 degrees. This is different than the slant, so I'll bring that back to 0 and hit enter. The stitch direction, this only applies if the back stitch is active and refers to the length of stitching. So, and that's in accordance with the complex fill. So this really won't have any type of effect on the satin, so we'll just kind of ignore that for now. The fixing stitch. The fixing stitch is also referred to as the tie stitch, and we have different types of tie stitching. And with the tie stitching, we actually have four activated here, and this shows us the type of tie stitching. And the fixing stitch will be from 0.5 millimeters. So typically by default, you know, we keep this. If you're doing larger letters, things like that, I might change to a different tie stitch that has a little bit more tie stitching, especially when you are doing longer stitches. But I think for now the default of 4 is quite good. The trimming option will allow you to define the trimming if it's longer than a certain, if the connection stitch is longer than a certain length. If you want the stitch connection, you can check mark this, and you do have the ability to choose what kind of connection you want. You can have it do automatic, the original, the way that it was digitized, optimized straight, on the baseline, which would be on this baseline right here. You know, you have different percentages, middle, and ascending. So if I choose baseline, and I'm going to show you right here, these are my connection stitches right here. Let's do baseline, and you'll see that change kind of towards the baseline of the stitching, or of the design. The original, that's how it was punched. If I deselect this, it'll automatically do my trimming according to the stitch length I input here. The other options I have are to change the stitch types. With this, I have a fill, and the distance, that is the density, that's 4.0. That actually means 0.40 millimeters. The underlay distance, or the underlay density, is 25, which actually means 2.5 millimeters. And the step length, which is the steps between the stitch penetrations on the underlay, is 2 millimeters. I can hit the extended button and go into more extended settings than what we have in here. I'll just cancel this for now. I also have the ability to put in a border if it's possible with this certain with this certain font. Right now this one does not have the ability to do a satin border. It does have the ability to do a run border, and if I click on this, I do have the ability to change what needle I want to do the border. I'll change that to 1, and what the stitch length should be. So now you'll see a darker border on that. If I want to change the stitch length for the stitches to be closer to one another, I can go ahead and change that. I'll go ahead and close my parameters. I will click off to the side, so now we can see our design and what we've changed. If you'd like to view the design in more of a realistic view, we can use the keyboard combination of Control and T. And when we use Control and T, you see your true view setting. You can change the options in here, but that will give us more of a realistic view. If I hit exit, that will get me out of that view. So now I'm ready to save my design as well as send it to the machine, or get it ready for the machine. And a couple things here. If I look at my film, I can see my block selection, and then the next tab is the order of embroidery. So what I see here with the order of embroidery, as I scroll up, I see that the first thing that stitches is the E, and then the outline of the E. You can see here too, it gives us some information that it is going to have a needle change, and it is going to have a trim. So you can see those two functions right there. But as this stitches out, you can see the order. We can change that, but we're not going to cover that right now, but you can see the order of embroidery and how it is going to sew on your machine. So the first thing that we'll do is save the design. So we'll go to File and Save, and once we choose that, we are going to make sure that the design starts in the middle and ends in the middle. So we'll go ahead and press OK, and once we press OK, it's going to access our library. Right now, on the left-hand side, we can choose what drive we want it to be put in, and this is going to be for the GIS file, not for the machine. We have several directories that we can choose from. If you haven't already put in a directory, what we would do here is just input a directory. You can name it whatever you'd like. And then we would left click on the second icon to input a new directory. Just go ahead and left click there. Now at the top it will give us a number and it will give us the name. If you'd like to name it something different, I'll just call this lettering test 1. And if you'd like to name it a different number, you can do so. So this is going to be in my lettering directory, and I'll hit save. Now if I'd like to take it to the machine, put it on a USB stick and take it to the machine, I would go to File and Save As. Again, it'll give me that option to start and stop in the middle. I'll go ahead and press OK, and then I would hit the Add Export. Once I choose that, I have the ZSK transport code that I can choose. This will match up our needles and everything, and I'll press OK. Once I press OK, I can then go into my directories. If I do have a USB drive, I would choose that USB drive, or I can choose a folder I can give it a file name or a file number. So with the file name, I can name it whatever I'd like. Typically, the transport code will use 8 digits, but you can change that. I'll go ahead and hit save. Once I hit save, it's now in that directory as a transport code, and I also have it within my design management.